Well, we learnt today that Victoria Police is treating a spate of anti-Semitic attacks on political officers as individual and separate investigations led by local police. This is despite the fact it would, at the very least, be a credible working hypothesis that the same group of activists might be involved in each. These incidents are escalating and growing more dangerous. It's astonishing these pro-Hamas activists haven't been arrested. They were still loose on the streets and free to strike Josh Burns' office in the early hours just this week. In fact, the lack of police action might be spurring these unlawful vandals on to commit even more outrageous crimes. They're not hiding, they're not shy or ashamed of their racist exploits. They're boasting about them online in posts that the tech companies are just allowing to stay up and go viral. Here is a clip of pro-Palestinian radicals attacking the Attorney General Mark Dreyfus's office.
See the liberation of Palestine.
All of us here tonight are brought together by a deep commitment to Israel's security. Palestinians may be suffering is not the main Israeli concern now.
Israel attacked Palestinian targets with F-16 warplanes, killing 11 people.
The Palestinian killed was two of his children.
About 20 Palestinians were killed today.
That was on the 5th of June. As you can see, they're shamelessly and brazenly waving these videos under the nose of police. And that video said, and the caption was, the Labor government, including Mark Dreyfus, voted against recognising the state of Palestine. We did some renovations to his office in response. Now, in a warning that's only going to get worse, their hashtag was Escalate for Rafah and Intifada, bring it home. And they filmed themselves also vandalising Bill Shorten's office too. Have a look.
The government supports the people of the UK didn't. Zionism's not compatible with Judaism. The hijacked faith, the state is misrepresenting Israel equals displacement and ethnic cleansing. I know I'm on a list for being more verbal. Curse every Zionist since Theodore Herzl. Balfour was not a wise man. Shame on Rothschild. Between them, the monster they created.
And it went on. But perhaps this next video is the worst, because you see the thugs violently smash Labor politician Daniel Molino's office window with hammers. And they also paint the red upside-down triangle that stands for Hamas.
وصحوبي ملان في الجلمة نصنع نعمل غلبة تجينا خيالي بناخد العتبة تخوف بالليل ندوي لك عتمة بشوف تنساش أنا زي النوس لح فتك في بغز رجال تحفر أنفع ترجع بشويل وملينا أشلاء بلاجين 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 بالجدع أنا فاتح دكان من بيعش هلسات والدم مسموح بس للسباع مكتوب على القرمة قسم لو غاد احنا جن بنطلع ما بتشوف.
Daniel Molino is a regular guest on this show. He's a Labor MP. His office was closed for 2 weeks after it was trashed. And then just as he was about to move back in, it was trashed again.
People emailing or calling or walking off the street with individual concerns. And this...
Blood on your hands, that's right.
That is right.
That is right. You do not represent us.
That's artwork. It's beautiful. You suck, man.
And that's what he's dealing with on a daily basis. But the Instagram account that posted that video actually takes the credit. It says, we, his constituents, opposed to genocide, paid him a visit. And it had that violent video that I just showed you before. I mean, they're all openly posting these videos. The Victorian editor for the Australian newspaper, Damon Johnston, reports today that despite pro-Palestinian vandals attacking up to a dozen federal and state electorate offices in the wake of October 7 terror attacks, Victoria Police confirmed it was yet to call in or establish a dedicated task force to lead the investigation. Asked by The Australian whether it could confirm how many attacks on electorate offices were being investigated, how many arrests and charges had been laid, and whether calling in a specialist task force was being considered, Victoria Police said these incidents are investigated by local crime investigation units. We do not have overall stats. I mean, can it really be that hard for police to do their jobs? It's likely the attacks on different politicians' offices are being done by the same group of people, given they're posting their own videos to the same social media accounts with the same hashtags, and the same group is taking credit for them in a sign-off image at the end. So how can police treat them as separate incidents and not set up a task force? Perhaps interviewing the people that run these pro-Palestinian groups linked to the social media accounts would be one obvious place to start. Because politicians, their staff, and the entire Jewish community are being intimidated. The activists themselves are warning this is going to escalate. Already the fire and violence at Josh Burns' office this week was more dangerous than the attacks that came before. And Josh Burns is seriously worried that someone is going to get hurt or, as he says, or worse.
This morning, 6 people turned up to my office. They came with kerosene. They smashed in windows with a hammer. They spray painted on the outside of my office. We've seen our family on the other side of the world being caught up in conflict. And I, you know, if I could do anything to stop this conflict from happening any longer, I would do it. But we can't do that in Australia. We just don't have that sort of leverage. I'm nervous about it escalating even further. I'm nervous about someone getting hurt or worse. And
yet there's no indication that police or the Prime Minister is taking this seriously enough. And this is what worries me. This lawlessness is out of control. And where are the authorities? It's a point former Treasurer Josh Frydenberg made. He said, what we need is more action from our political leaders and law enforcement to protect the community. Our leaders must step up and wrest control back from the mob, a mob that has had free rein since October 7 to act in a violent, hateful and un-Australian manner. He says it's not just the Jewish community that's under attack, it's Australia's social cohesion that is under attack and the very values that underpin it. And Josh says, as he keeps saying, this is Australia's fight. Let's be very clear. We are seeing a dereliction of duty. The truth is, there's a lack of political will to take action. When Albanese criticises these attacks, and he does criticise them, he often says a line that it undermines the Palestinian cause.
And how people think that they advance their cause through activities like this is beyond me. It does nothing. It undermines the cause that people purport to represent.
It is unacceptable that misinformation is being consciously and deliberately spread by some Green senators and MPs who have engaged in this in demonstrations outside offices and online. All of us have a responsibility to prevent conflict in the Middle East from being used as a platform for prejudice here at home.
And in that statement, he went on to say again that it undermines the Palestinian cause for which he said he has advocated for his whole life. Well, these are very weak statements that it undermines their cause, because these criminals are posting the Hamas symbol and slogans like Zionism is fascism. It doesn't undermine the cause because there is no cause there. Anti-Semitism isn't a cause. And that shows you how morally feeble our Prime Minister is. But it's not just the police and our politicians. You have to look at the media too. Now, the ABC's 7:30 report had a good look at this issue, at the vandalism of politicians and their offices last week. It was a good report. But then look how they present it. They had this headline: Are Gaza protesters crossing the line by vandalising MPs' offices? ? Yes, of course they are. The failure of law enforcement is so alarming that a former Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions for the Commonwealth, Mark LeGrand, has been spurred to speak out. Legrand, who was also a member of the National Crime Authority, well, he's going to come on my program on Monday night to speak about this. But in the meantime, he says that Jews have been abandoned by those charged with enforcing the rule of law and equal protection. He says they've been abandoned by governments, by police, and by the so-called human rights and racial vilification bodies. And he holds the Prime Minister squarely responsible because he says it's Albanese's duty to protect the people, all people, not just some. And Mark Legrand recounts that in 1975, ASIO uncovered a plan by Palestinian terrorists to assassinate Bob Hawke for his support of Israel, along with several high-profile Jewish figures. Now, Hawke, at the time, was a proud advocate for the state of Israel, and as you know, he said famously that if the bell tolls for Israel, it tolls for all of mankind. Well, Mark Legrand writes in The Australian that Albanese would know this history from the official briefings, and he writes that in this context, by his failure to commit to urgent and serious action to rein in this rampant Jew hatred, his government is complicit and playing with fire. This contagion of Jew hatred is expanding exponentially. From past experience, it soon will become difficult to control. He writes the blood libels and racial tropes that have bedeviled the Jewish people for more than a millennium are being resurrected. Legrand says that to avoid a future tragedy, Albanese must act with commitment, vigour and courage. And you have to ask, is he even paying close attention? Is ASIO, are the intelligence agencies, is the AFP? Because we cannot let this get to the point where someone is injured or worse. Our political leaders and our police must act now to arrest these extremists and stop this clear escalation in violence. Everyone can see it's happening. We can't put up with the Prime Minister being weak on this issue simply for some votes in marginal Western Sydney seats. The safety of politicians, their staff and Jewish Australians are far too important.